Meanwhile, more U.S. boots on the ground in northern Syria with the deployment of an additional 400 Marines. The new contingent is assisting local forces prepare for the impending siege to take Raqqa back from ISIS. For more on this now, let's bring in Lieutenant Colonel Michael Waltz, a former Special Forces officer and Fox News contributor. Colonel, good to see you.
Good afternoon.
Absolutely. Well, this is a significant change in strategy by President Trump. Is this the right move, and what more can you tell us about the mission?
Well, the introduction of these artillerymen, these Marines, are bolstering one of kind of three main pillars, so to speak, in our strategy. One is what I call the enablers. That's the artillery, the logistics, the close air support that we're providing support to the local ground forces. You know, the second is the advisory effort, where Green Berets really specialize, and those are the special forces close to the front lines but not kicking in doors and pulling triggers, and that are helping the local forces close to the fight. And then the third piece, of course, are the special operators in the dead of the night that are going after ISIS leadership, al-Baghdadi and his lieutenants. So I don't know that it's necessarily a strategy shift, but we're bolstering each one of those pieces as we move close to Raqqa. What I worry about, and where General Keane is very worried as well, is who's actually going to take Raqqa. I mean, the Turkish foreign minister said if the Kurds with U.S. Special Forces support go into Raqqa, that will be a serious breach of U.S.-Turkish relations. And you know we have many other things to worry about with Turkey, including NATO and Russia. And then I even worry about the day after.
Yeah, I'm going to get to Russia as it pertains to this story in a moment, but I want to follow up on something you said, because that is why President Obama was reluctant to put American troops on the ground in Syria without an end game or a plan for post-success. But do we know President Trump's end game? And here's the question: might President Trump stand to perhaps be more successful because Syrian President Assad says that he wants to work with President Trump?
Well, you know, two things there. One on President Obama and being reluctant. Look, just because it is difficult and because it's complicated doesn't mean we don't get involved. We've seen what happens with massive migration flows into Europe that have destabilized the EU and threatened the homeland. We've seen what happened when we allowed, you know, when America basically did nothing and we allowed peaceful protests turn into just a horrific civil war, the reintroduction of Russia. And don't forget, Russia is working side by side with Iran. So I think we've learned the fallacy of pulling out of Iraq and trying to do nothing in Syria and wish it away. We have to be involved, and I think this is the right way to be involved, to enable and work with local forces, but not put hundreds of thousands of American boots on the ground. My problem with the Obama administration is it was either, you know, you're a warmonger if you want to be engaged, or we just should pull out of the Middle East and leave a security vacuum there. And I think that was a specious choice at best.
And, you know, this current move, though, is still going to bring about a series of questions, questions like, can Assad be trusted? And how does this or his cooperation play out on the battlefield? You say it's a very crowded field. And is it okay for Assad to remain in power after this war is over? And to my point about Putin, are Putin's fingerprints on this? I mean, he's been Assad's biggest supporter all along.
Well, you know, 2 points there, One, we cannot, it is easy and oversimplistic to think, well, we can work with the Russians against ISIS. The Russians are not there to defeat ISIS. The Russians are there to support a murderous Iran regime, which, keep in mind, is closely aligned with Iran. Iranian regular army forces are on the ground fighting alongside the Russian and Assad regime. So I don't think that is our choice. And this is why, you know, our State Department and diplomacy is so critical. We have to set the political stage that we're working towards. That could be a national government with a power sharing type of arrangement, or we could be looking at the partition of Syria. We have to look at what's best in U.S. interests, and I think that is keeping extremists at bay, both Shia, Iranian, and Sunni ISIS at bay, and creating a structure that can bring stability to that part of the Middle East with safe zones. I mean, there's all kinds of elements to the strategy.
A separated Syria, I mean, that's already going to be a huge challenge for someone to come up from the outside and tell the country what to do. Not to mention, you have some people saying that President Assad should stay in power. Some people say no, he shouldn't because of, you know, civil rights infringements, you know, killing of civilians.
Sure. one of the greatest humanitarian disasters in in modern history. But again, that is why we need to get our State Department staffed. We need to get them engaged. America has to lead in the region. Secretary Tillerson is hosting the Counter-ISIS Coalition in the coming month, and we have to exactly put a strategy in place that figures out what that end state looks like and then move the military strategy to achieve it. But that's why diplomacy, intelligence, military, and economic issues are all critical in kind of a whole of government approach to this. We can't just focus on narrow military means, because what we're going to find is, right now we could find ourselves in the middle of a five-way war between the Russians, the Assad regime, the Iranians, the Turks, the Kurds, and of course the Arabs on the ground. Right,
but so should that be a major reason to be concerned? You said that Americans have to take the lead over there in trying to assert and apply democracy. Wouldn't that cause problems? And then you have those ISIS fighters there in Syria. They're waiting for American troops to come to them.
Well, I don't necessarily know that we impose democracy, but I do think we've seen, again, we've seen the fallacy, we've seen the wrong decision behind just saying, well, it's too hard, America needs to leave, or we have to tie our hands. The worst thing we can do is what we've done in the last 8 years is have forces over there, but have overly restrictive ROE, over concern about civilian casualties, and not let them necessarily do their job. But, I think we can move towards a power-sharing agreement. I don't think personally that will include Assad at the head of what will be the Alawite government. It could look something like Lebanon's power-sharing agreement now, which by all means is not perfect, but it would be a lot better than what we have. My worry with a partition and kind of dividing the country up is I think you'll see a lot more bloodshed, and I don't think those localized governments could keep extremist elements at bay. So I think we could see the broad outlines of where we need to go, but the administration needs to get a strategy in place, and right now we're waiting on a military options from the Pentagon, but that broader strategy needs to get in place first.
It's definitely complicated, and I appreciate your analysis, Colonel Waltz, and we'll have you on again to discuss this unfolding situation over there. Thank you so much, sir.
Thanks, Arthel.